Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ask the President with Michele Siekerka, the President of the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. Today, Michele will discuss two major issues that are affecting the state's business climate: mandatory paid sick leave and the fiscal year 2016 state budget. In February, Governor Christie introduced a $33.8 billion spending plan, spending most of his address to the legislature discussing the state's broken pension system. Today, we'll talk about how the state's budget is good for business and how the state may go about fixing pensions. Michele will also talk about paid sick leave, a key issue for businesses who are getting weary of paying high taxes and dealing with an onslaught of government mandates. To date, several municipalities have implemented their own sick leave laws, and a potential statewide law still languishes in the legislature. A few housekeeping issues before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you automatically in the next day or so. Also, we will be emailing you the slides for today's presentation in a separate email, so be on the lookout for those. Lastly, after Michele completes her presentation, we will be taking all of your questions. So now, I'd like to turn things over to Michele Siekerka.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you joining me again today for my second Ask the President. After my first Ask the President earlier this year, I found that this is a great opportunity to spend time connecting with members, hearing about issues that are on your mind, but also sharing with you firsthand things that NJBIA is working on for our members' interest. Today, as Peter suggested, I want to focus on two significant issues affecting the New Jersey business climate and overall our ability to grow our economy in the state of New Jersey: paid sick leave and the pending government budget. So let's start with paid sick leave. As many of you know, right now there is a bill passing through the Assembly regarding paid sick leave. This legislation currently is not in the Senate, and we're not sure when it may be up for a vote on the Assembly floor. However, we continue to be very mindful of ensuring that this legislation doesn't proceed forward. Let's talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals of that bill and why it's a problem for New Jersey businesses. And I think that we always have to get this in perspective. Why would we be upset about a paid sick leave bill? Let's start from the premise that over 70% of New Jersey businesses currently offer paid sick leave to their employees. In addition to that, over 90% of New Jersey employers provide some form of paid time off to their employees. This is very important. Employers, like you, know that good welfare programs are what attracts a good workforce, puts out a good product, allows you to then earn profits and sales, and allows you to reinvest in your company. It's competition. You know what works in your workforce, and government shouldn't tell you what to do. This is the premise that we face with paid sick leave and the challenges, because that 70% or that 90% are now going to be put in a box. And why do I say that, put in a box? The state legislation does not have an exemption provision for employers who currently have paid sick leave policies or paid time off policies. So regardless of the generous program that you may have in your company today, you will be subject to the specific requirements of the state policy. Let's talk about what some of those requirements are. All businesses, regardless of your size, will have to offer either 5 or 9 paid days off. If you have less than 10 employees, it'll be 5 days off. And if you have greater than 10 employees, it'll be 9 paid days off. This applies to full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees, and the time begins to accrue on day 1. Employees will be allowed to carry forward unused sick time from year to year. Therefore, they can accumulate this time over the course of their employment. Now, they can't cash it out, so some say it has no monetary value, but you understand the value of carrying over sick time and what that costs you. In addition, in terms of the fact that people say that there is no monetary value, when someone exercises their paid sick leave, you will have to pay for someone to take their place. So there is an inherent monetary value to you. New Jersey is leading a coalition of business organizations who are opposed to this legislation. What are some of the other reasons why we're opposed to this legislation? Paperwork. We talk about putting you in a box. Right now, you would have to report paid sick leave under the state policy in 1-hour increments. 1-hour increments. Think about currently how you utilize paid sick leave in your place of employment and how you keep records for your employment. Think about your back office systems and how you'll have to reconfigure your back office systems in order to deliver reporting in 1-hour increments. So individuals could take paid sick leave in 1-hour increments. You have to report it in 1-hour increments. And in addition to that, you have to maintain that reporting for up to 5 years. Again, I ask you to think about your back office operations, how you will have to maneuver your back office operations in order to address that type of reporting requirement. Candidly, we question the state's ability to take on that type of an enforcement, to actually recommend or request those reports from you, and the ability to carry those reports and be able to enforce them against you. So there's challenges inherent in the paperwork that you are required to maintain for paid sick leave. That's problematic. It costs you money. Let's talk about anti-retaliation provisions that are currently in the policy. Oftentimes, you may have an employee who exercises a paid sick leave day, and you may question whether or not they were truly sick. Under the current legislation, you can't question their ability to take that day, and after 3 days, you can ask them for a doctor's note. However, you would need to pay for them to get that doctor's note if they did not go to the doctor. Now, during that time, you may have projects that that person is assigned to, and you may assign someone else to that project, and when the employee returns to work, now you may take the employee who exercised their sick time and put them on a different project. That employee may suggest that that reassignment is in retaliation for them exercising their paid sick leave. What I'm suggesting here is the anti-retaliation provisions are very overreaching and make it very difficult to discipline an employee who you may perceive as abusing paid sick time. Another part of the paid sick leave that is challenging is that you, the employer, have to find the replacement for the employee who is exercising the day off. You need to find the coverage, not the employee. So the example I always like to give is that during college I bartended. And when I bartended, I had occasion to have to take a day off of work because I might have been sick. But I had the roster of my colleagues next to me. I knew who they were, and I could call one of my colleagues to cover my shift for me. It was my responsibility, and I didn't think it was a big deal to have to make that call to one of my colleagues and get that shift covered. Because if I wasn't there, who was going to do the job? Well, under the current policy, it's up to you, the employer, to find the coverage, not the employee. You cannot ask the employee to make phone calls to their colleagues to find coverage for their shift. It's on you. All of these provisions, again, make the state policy one that is very challenging and looks to put New Jersey employers, the overwhelming majority of which already have policies, into a box that will make it very challenging and costly for you to meet the requirements of the law. So again, I want to urge you all to join our coalition. You'll see up on your screen is our website. Visit keepnewjerseycompetitive.org. We have information about the policy, and we also have information there about how you can connect directly with your assembly members and ask them to vote no on the bill. You can use our member alert, and again, you'll see that there is a web address for the purpose of doing that. We encourage you to take advantage of that. While paid sick leave is an issue on the state level, paid sick leave is additionally a larger issue on the local level, and let's spend some time talking about that. Currently, there are 9 municipalities across the state of New Jersey who have implemented a local paid sick leave ordinance. Those municipalities are Jersey City, Paterson, Irvington, Montclair, Trenton, Bloomfield, East Orange, Newark, and Passaic. Each of these municipalities has established a local ordinance that mandates paid sick leave to the employers that are located within that municipality. This is problematic in that it creates a patchwork of laws across the state that makes it burdensome for business, particularly those with multiple locations throughout the state, to understand what ordinance is in effect for them. NJBIA is a great example. We are now subject to the ordinance that was put forth here in the city of Trenton. BIA also has an office up in Fairfield, New Jersey. Now, my employees in Fairfield, New Jersey will be subject to a Trenton ordinance because the practicality is that I, as a Trenton employer, are not going to have 2 different policies for my employees just because they're located in 2 different places. Now, today, that's not so difficult for me because Fairfield doesn't have a local ordinance. So, however I'm required to comply with the Trenton ordinance will be the policy in place that my Fairfield employees will follow as well. However, what if Fairfield has a local ordinance that's at odds with the Trenton ordinance? I'm going to be in a position as an employer to have to understand how I meet local mandates in 2 different municipalities in providing one consistent policy to my employees. Local ordinances may sound good in theory, but in practicality they're impossible for companies to keep up with and understand how they can handle multiple locations throughout the state. Another challenge with the local ordinances is that they, again, do not exempt companies who already have in place paid sick leave policies. So we have, again, the example of over 70% of businesses, or over 90% with paid sign-off policies, having to meet local requirements in terms of reporting requirements in order to meet a local ordinance. Now, as BIA, being an employer subject to the ordinance, we were extremely concerned about how the Trenton ordinance would impact us and our fellow companies here in the city of Trenton. BIA, along with 5 other trade associations, brought a lawsuit in the city of Trenton, against the city of Trenton, in Superior Court, challenging the paid sick leave ordinance and arguing to the court that the enactment of such an ordinance is beyond the police power of a local city or municipality. The decision was determined last week by Judge Jacobson, who ruled not in our favor, finding that these types of policies are in fact addressing an issue of public health. The one shining star that came out of our litigation was that on the record it was clarified that these types of policies within a municipality only are relevant to the businesses within the 4 corners of that municipality. So, for example, in the city of Trenton, only Trenton-based businesses are subject to the ordinance. The way the ordinance was originally written, one would have suggested that employees who are passing through Trenton conducting business, for example, lawyers who are conducting their business in the courthouse in Trenton, but their office is located outside of Trenton, if those lawyers worked in the city of Trenton more than 80 hours a year, under the ordinance as it was written, it would have been suggested that those lawyers would have been subject, and their employers, to the Trenton ordinance. So the judge stated on the record a clarification that these ordinances are only enacted against companies within the 4 corners of the municipality, that being Trenton businesses. Now, that doesn't make the situation any better. While that clarity helps, it still leaves all those employers who already have policies having to now look at their own policies and remaneuver them into a way to meet the requirements of the Trenton ordinance, just like within the 8 other municipalities across the state. Again, this creates a patchwork, very difficult for companies to enact business in the state of New Jersey, and certainly a hindrance to growing our economy. There was one municipality who took a pass, for now at least, on an ordinance that was attempting to gain favor in their city, and that was Plainfield. Last week, the Plainfield Town Council struck down an ordinance. Now, whether that comes back, we will continue to watch. And candidly, this force forward by working families is going to continue across the state at the local level, seeking other municipalities who will look to have a paid sick leave at the local level. We will continue to be steadfast on this issue, not just at the state level, but at the local level, where we will continue to meet with local officials and explain to them the practicalities, or in fact lack of practicality, in having a local ordinance around paid sick leave. It was suggested in Jersey City that a survey that was conducted 1 year after the paid sick leave ordinance went into effect, it was suggested that paid sick leave is good for the city of Jersey City. The survey was conducted by the Center for Women at Rutgers, and it suggested that paid sick leave ordinance in Jersey City is successful to date. Now, there was some statistics within the survey, and I would invite anyone who's interested in numbers to actually take a look at the survey and see the questions that were asked and the response that were gotten. The city touts that 32.8% of those who changed their policy in response to the new law found increased productivity. Well, if that's the case, 32.8% found increased productivity. What about the other 67.2%? One could suggest that they found no increased productivity. Think about that. Also, think about the statistics we talked about earlier. Anyone who already had a policy in effect, over 70% of those businesses, if they already have a policy in effect, then how do you gauge that a new policy through a mandate at a local level was having any further impact than the fact that employers already were providing these programs to their employees? Therefore, good welfare programs were driving good productivity in those companies. The Rutgers study also did not ask any questions about potential negatives associated with the law, including whether the ordinance led to layoffs, reduced hours, or fewer raises. We have seen some evidence from other studies across the country on mandates such as paid sick leave, which would suggest that these types of mandates do in fact lead to slow growth, layoffs, reduced hours, or fewer raises. The concern we hear from members is they're not going to be so fast to create new jobs, or they're going to look more at per diem work rather than creating full-time opportunities so that they can avoid the costs inherent in providing these types of mandated programs. So again, I invite you all on paid sick leave. Please continue to follow our plight. Please help to support us. We need information, direct information from how these ordinances can, do, or will affect you in practicality. When we legislate on these issues, when we advocate on these issues to our legislators and our policymakers, we don't want to be just a soundbite. We want to have data to support. So any of you who are joining me today who have data, who can help us in our continuing effort to fend off paid sick leave, whether it be at the state level or the local level, please give me a call and provide that information to us. We can keep the name of your company anonymous. We can stand in your shoes, but your data is very important in order for us to be successful in our efforts. Let's talk a bit about the state budget. This is a very important issue right now for businesses, and we started out with a very positive signal from Governor Christie when he delivered the State of the Budget address. Governor Christie said 4 very important things that are a good signal to business when it comes to the state budget. Number 1, he said no tax increases. Second, he is going to continue the final phase into the $2.3 billion tax reform program that was started in 2012, meaning that there will be $660 million back to New Jersey companies in fiscal year 16. Third, the governor spoke of converting the Business Employment Incentive Program grants, known as BEAP, getting them out of the state budget in the appropriation process to a refundable tax credit that would operate outside of the budget going forward. That's very important because that provides certainty to those who are the recipients of those grants going forward. The fourth important thing that the governor spoke of is that he is going to attempt in his best manner possible to address the state pension and benefits issue with reform. The governor had a commission who put forth a report that thinks outside the box on how we can address our state pension system. We know that right now the way our state pension system is operating is not sustainable. If you look at the amounts of money that are required to be put into the pension on an annual basis, if we were to fund to 100% of those amounts, there would be minimal funds left in the general fund in order to provide relief to safety net programs, as well as economic growth opportunities in the state of New Jersey. These 4 points, no tax increases, the phase into the $2.3 billion continuing with that return of $660 million, the conversion of the BEAP grants, and taking on the state pension program, these are the types of positive economic signals that you all told us that you were looking for coming into 2015 when you participated in our Business Outlook survey last fall. New Jersey companies stated that they need strong economic positive signals in 2015 early on in the year in order to allow you to continue to make the investments that you've been making in the last 2 years that have led to an increase in growth, profits, and sales. Now, we know that our growth in New Jersey is slow, but we do know that we have appreciated growth in sales and profits and jobs over the past 2 years, and you are looking forward to continuing that upward trend in 2015. It is the signals like those that the governor gave us in his budget address that should help to bring some relief to all of you looking for regulatory certainty. However, and unfortunately there's always a however, we have already heard from our Senate President that it is important that this is the time that we consider a millionaire's tax. Now, we know that a millionaire's tax means a tax on small business, and we know that small business does not a millionaire make in the state of New Jersey. Right now, we need to continue to gather data on how a millionaire's tax will, in fact, have a direct impact on small business and how that will cause small business the inability to reinvest in their companies going forward. We need to continue to send this message to our policymakers. We were successful in 2014 in fending off a millionaire's tax, and we feel that we will be successful again this year. But again, it is important that we have data at our fingertips to point to when we make these arguments before our legislators. We are gathering data, again, on how many small businesses would be affected by a millionaire's tax. And if you are someone who thinks that your company may be affected, please let us know. Another thing we are very sensitive to throughout the budget process, and something we were seeking relief on, but unfortunately it looks like we've run out of money this session to do it, is relief on estate and inheritance tax. We know that we hear every day from employers and from companies and from individuals that more and more they're thinking of leaving the state of New Jersey before transferring their family-owned business within the state of New Jersey. There's the connection between business and estate and inheritance tax, the family-owned business. In the state of New Jersey, we know the vast majority of businesses are small business, and of that, we know there is an extremely large percent of generational family-owned business who would be impacted by estate and inheritance tax. Sadly, the other day when I was out on my road trip visiting with members and speaking at one of our ELCs, at the end of the program, a business person came up to me, a gentleman, and he had his son next to him, and he said, "I'm doing my business planning right now. Please meet my son who's the next generation of my business. Unfortunately, I have a great concern that if, God forbid, I pass away tomorrow, the burden that my son would have once he takes care of the estate and inheritance tax issues that would plague him because of his role in my company, I'm concerned he can't carry the business forward." In fact, he said, "I'm so concerned that we've already talked about when it comes time to transfer the business that we're not going to do it here in the state of New Jersey." Unfortunately, I hear this story too often when I'm out visiting with our member companies. It's time for the legislature to understand that we cannot afford to put the issue of estate and inheritance tax relief off any longer. This is a prime example of what is a cause of outward migration for business people and companies from the state of New Jersey. A few quick statistics. Between 2000 and 2010, New Jersey lost $15.7 billion, that's right, I said $15.7 billion, of taxable income that would have made it to the general fund for purposes of being considered for spending in the state of New Jersey, $15.7 billion. In 1 year alone, between 2009 and 2010, New Jersey lost $5 billion of taxable income to the general fund. This is the result of outward migration, people and companies leaving the state of New Jersey. What else do they take when they leave in addition to that taxable income? Did you know that 44% of property tax is taken the burden by New Jersey businesses? 44% of the property tax in New Jersey is paid by New Jersey businesses. So that leaves when a company leaves as well. Of course, the jobs leave, but another thing that leaves is spending power. Think of a business person who spent their entire career in the state of New Jersey and grew their affluence through their company. They are now going to leave the state of New Jersey and take their spending power, the money that they generated, and spend it in the economy in another state, not in the state of New Jersey. That hurts our local markets here in New Jersey and certainly affects our overall economic opportunities. So it's time that we address issues like estate and inheritance tax, and the perfect time to do that is when we are considering the state budget. NJBIA testified in support of the governor's budget before the State and Assembly Budget Committee in March. We've been attending numerous meetings with our policymakers. Our lobbyists are on the street every day with your representatives, whether it be right in your neighborhood or here in the State House, discussing the current proposals on the budget, and we will remain steadfast through June 30th to ensure that the positive economic signals that the governor set forth when he presented his initial address continue to be how the budget will play out come July 1. So I want to take a break, and I want to open this up because the idea here is for this to be interactive. We've talked about two very critical things that are going on, and we've talked about BIA's role in helping to advance your interest on those issues. So Peter, let's take some questions from the audience.
Michele, we had some questions that were sent in over the course of the week, and we have a few that are stacked up right now, so let's get started. You may have gone over some of this material already, but it's probably a good idea to take a little bit more time to dive a little bit deeper into some of them, particularly the estate and inheritance tax and also workforce development, which you did not reference, but we have a question about. So Marilyn Askin from AARP says, we're receiving a lot of anecdotal information from our members about retirees leaving the state because of the high cost of living here and because of the estate tax on assets over $675,000. And she wants to know what we're doing on this issue.
Marilyn, thank you for asking that. I gave you a brief update on what we are doing to address estate and inheritance tax at this time. And you're right. That number, 675,000, that is a critical number. That is an extremely low threshold. Think about the state of New Jersey. Think about what an estate might look like. If you own a home, if you're fortunate enough in the state of New Jersey to own a home, chances are the value of your home hits that number right there, especially in North Jersey. And if you were responsible and you put away money towards your retirement, a 401k, or if you were even fortunate enough to have a pension, think about over the course of your career what that might equal. Now, think about taxing that and think about what's left to your heirs, and think about it in the business setting as well. So we are only one of 2 states in the country that have dual death taxes, estate and inheritance tax. We are an extreme outlier in this regard. And that number, the threshold of 675,000, is the lowest in the country, the lowest in the country. So this is a challenge. Marilyn, we are continuing our effort and our advocacy daily with our legislators, bringing them the hard data like the numbers I suggested before on outward migration, and sharing with them the stories like I shared earlier about the business people who tell me day in and day out that they will not transfer their businesses in the state of New Jersey, and when they retire, they're leaving the state of New Jersey. We're out there fighting this fight, and hopefully we will have some success and bring some relief shortly.
Michele, Lynn Donaldson had 3 questions, so we'll take them one at a time. We'll start with the first one and then kind of double back after we get to some other folks. But Lynn would like to know, how would you classify the company who would be applicable to the Millionaire's tax?
Thank you very much. That's a great question. Let's step back for a minute and let's talk about how S-Corps, which is predominantly the way that small businesses are set up in their corporate fashion. S-Corps, what do their tax returns look like? And it's great because we're just coming off a tax season. I think everybody's really riled up because they all just filed their returns. S-Corps file their business tax through their personal return. So there's one tax return. It takes their business income and it goes through their personal return. We've learned that between 65 and 74% of an S-Corp return is actually business assets that are being taxed at the highest rate already. So if you think about, if you're hitting these large brackets and it's small business hitting it, it's now your business tax that is being taxed at the highest level. That's money, again, that you can't reinvest into your company. So how do we define in revenue small business? Well, again, I would suggest in the state of New Jersey that this is a high-cost state, and you need to make a decent amount of money to be able to thrive and survive here, ergo our challenge. A small business that can earn income of $1 million and be able to reinvest that money into their business, if they're going to be paying that out in taxes, they're not going to be growing their company. So now when we're writing that check to the government, the money that is in that check is not going back into the business. That means that we can't grow a job, we can't put out a new product. Instead, we're going to be paying that money to the general fund.
We have a question now from Jack O'Connor, and let's shift over to workforce development, which I know you talk about quite a bit and have not really touched on today, but we're very involved in leading the way on this issue. Jack wants to know on workforce development in New Jersey, what kind of programs are there in the service industries to retrain and uptrain individuals who have become unemployable or economically underemployed?
Jack, thanks so much for asking about workforce development, because this is an area that BIA thrives on. I really want everyone to understand the role that BIA plays in workforce development. I would suggest that we are the largest organization who facilitates workforce development partnerships in the state of New Jersey. What do I mean by that? NJBIA facilitates collaboration between our members, academia, and every level of academia, which is career and vocational education, community college, and four-year institutions, along with government, in particular the Office of Higher Education, the Department of Education, and the Department of Labor. We bring those three parties together to create opportunities for workforce development and have been very successful in programs over the last few years. Let me give you an example of some of those programs. The governor just signed a 5-bill package earlier this year, the Career and Technical Education Package. Within it, was a series of actions that BIA helped to support and to promote that would provide more career-ready skills, employability skills, and overall workforce skills through K-12 and beyond. The idea is to incorporate career-ready skills from the day students enter school all the way through their educational process. And why is that important? We hear time and time again from our companies and employers like you that the skill sets are missing when you hire, or that you are challenged in hiring because you can't find people who have the requisite skill set. There's two types of skill sets we talk about. We talk about technical skills, particularly in areas of technology right now, and I'll give you an example of some work on that in a second. And we also talk about employability skills, which are those soft skills, getting to work on time, communication, what does it mean to be responsible for a project. These types of skills, these employability soft skills, are woefully lacking, as our employers tell us. Talk about technical skills for a minute, an example of a program that we were instrumental in bringing partners together for. In manufacturing, we hear from our manufacturing members time and time again that the technical skills are missing and that there are not individuals that they can employ for the new types of technology that we have the benefit of having in our manufacturing facilities in the state of New Jersey. Megatronics comes to mind. We had a program where we took two of our trustees on our board of trustees worked with Middlesex County Community College to write the criteria for a metal fabrication program that students could go through the program at the community college, get their certification, walk out and get a job. Over 100 students have gone through that certification process and are being employed as we speak. Now, that's an example of manufacturing, but Jack, I will tell you, it's those types of programs throughout all industries that are taking place through the partnerships that we've been able to facilitate when it comes to workforce development.
Michele, we have a question from Sharon Biles, who is back on paid sick leave. She wants to know what size company does the paid sick leave policy impact? And I know we have sort of a patchwork of ordinances, so there may not be a standard answer, but if you can talk about the overall impact in that respect.
Cheryl, this is one of the big challenges. The state policy affects every employer in the state of New Jersey. Every employer in the state of New Jersey. If you have less than 10 employees under the state policy, you would have to provide, beginning on day one, their ability to earn 5 days of paid sick leave. If you have over 10 employees, it would be 9 days of paid sick leave. The challenge is at the local level with the patchwork, some of those rules are different. So in Trenton, for example, while it is still every size employee, but it's 3 days for a employer of less than 10 employees. So this is where the patchwork becomes really interesting and really challenging, especially if you're a company with multiple locations.
And Michele, I guess one of the key takeaways from the whole litigation process was that patchwork as you described, but a real way of looking at this is, let's say you had, well, there's two ways. Let's say you own 7 McDonald's franchises and 3 are located in cities where you have a paid sick leave ordinance and the rest are located in areas where you don't. What are some of the problems that that type of situation creates?
As we mentioned, the challenge for an employer like BIA with multiple locations is that it's twofold. Number one, we now have a Trenton ordinance that is impacting employees in Fairfield. That's one part of the case that I don't think the judge properly addressed in terms of the stretching, if you will, of an ordinance beyond the municipality where the ordinance is meant to have impact. Now the judge would say that I'm not telling you that you have to provide Trenton's ordinance and what it requires to your employees in Fairfield, but this is where practicality walks out the door. As an employer, I'm not going to have 2, 3, 4, or 5 different policies for my employees. I have to have one policy because that's the only way I can be practical and effective in delivering a good welfare program for my employees. So now I'm going to have to look at probably, if I have 4 or 5 locations, what's the most generous policy, and I'm going to have that policy in effect for all of my employees, regardless of what the local ordinance may be. And while that may sound easy, the reporting requirements could be different. There could be subtleties and intricacies of each ordinance that I just might not be able to keep up with. And candidly, the concern there is there could be an enforcement action against me for some nuance that makes it impossible for me to understand given 5 different ordinances that I have to put into effect.
I'd like to encourage all of our listeners to keep the questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can between now and noon. If we have more than that, we will run slightly over. We'll take all of your questions the best we can, so keep them coming. Another question from Jack O'Connor. It's back on paid sick leave. Wants to know what changes to the proposed statewide law or legislation would we accept to pass what he says, quote, the majority of citizens want?
Jack, I would suggest to you, given some of the statistics I gave earlier, the 70% with paid sick leave and the over 90% with paid time off, I would suggest that the majority of citizens are being covered by welfare programs right now. And they're being covered in a way that is flexible for the workplace within which they perform. You know, the challenge, take paid time off, for example. We have many, many companies, and again, I've heard this directly from our members, they have a paid time off policy. So what does paid time off mean? Paid time off means, for example, a company gives you 10 PTO days in a year. You can use those days as the employee any way you want. They're not distinguished as sick or vacation or personal leave or whatever type of policy some companies may have. The ultimate in flexibility. What's so great about that for an employee? Well, think about it. You have a healthy year, you have 10 vacation days you can take, and nobody's going to ask you about it. You have a year that you were sick once or twice, or you had a family member that was sick once or twice, you can use all those 10 days for sick time, and maybe that's the year you can't afford to take a vacation. But get the idea of the flexibility that's built in that. This is what we're trying to protect and preserve. So any policy that would not exempt current policies or current programs that are in effect currently within the workplace, any state policy that would not exempt those 70 or 90% who know what it takes in their workplace to deliver a good welfare program, we would not be able to support those types of policies.
Michele, if you can kind of expand what you've been talking about regarding the whole patchwork, because we've talked about paid sick leave. We just went through a bill that was introduced in the legislature that would allow municipalities to set their own minimum wages. What do you have to say about the notion of, and this is primarily driven by the Working Families Group and other groups like it, what would you say about the potential impact and your general thoughts of a move to, if you can't get something done on the state level, hey, let's forget about that and just move on, going city by city, and if you manage to hit Newark, Jersey City, and Trenton, you've probably captured a pretty good percentage of the state's residents?
Well, let me start with one piece of what would be good news on that issue, because that is a not good news issue when we talk about municipal wages at the municipal level. But the good news is that Senate President Sweeney at our Meet the Decision Makers program a few weeks ago stated rather emphatically that he does not have an appetite for minimum wage at the local level. And actually, he felt, and as is the case, that the state just addressed this issue last year when we addressed minimum wage at the state level and then had a constitutional amendment to recognize that and ensure that it increases, each year. So I don't think that that's going anywhere, but why is it problematic? It's problematic because now, not even just an employer who has multiple locations in the state of New Jersey, but let's just take a typical street in New Jersey. We have 565 municipalities in the state of New Jersey, and one street, Broad Street in any town, New Jersey, could expand 3 different municipalities. You could have 5 pizzerias, 2 dry cleaners, and maybe 2 small law firms along Broad Street in any town, New Jersey. Well, Broad Street is really crossing 3 any towns, New Jersey. And now I have the pizzeria in town 1 who's mandating minimum wage at $11 an hour. And I have any town number 2 that is literally a half a block down Broad Street mandating $12.50 an hour. And you got the same going down the street. What kind of story is that telling? It's very challenging. So now you're creating a whole new dynamic in the economy of how are employers going to deal with that on the ground practically. And if there's one word that I want to just continue to bring up when we talk about ordinances like this and mandates at the local level, is lack of practicality. Unless you sit with a small business and talk to them about how mandates like paid sick leave, minimum wage, and any other type of mandate at a local level will impact their ability on the ground, boots on the ground, to do their business, our legislators don't know how impractical these solutions or lack of solutions are.
And to follow up on that, I guess we always try to make the case about the connection, but it's interesting to me how there is a movement across the state to go city by city to implement what cannot be implemented statewide, and also to sort of go on an ad hoc basis and dictate employer benefits, which I know we've spoken about and we oppose. But it seems like the groups who do this, on one hand, they want businesses to create jobs and will hammer away if jobs are not created and complain about that, but on the other, continue to go in a patchwork way, municipality by municipality, and also on a statewide basis, to create mandates and other issues that make it very difficult for businesses to have that confidence to invest, which leads to the creation of jobs. So they seem like two mutually exclusive things. You can't want something, on the other hand, that leads to the other thing and then criticize for the thing we all want not happening.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peter, and therein lies the challenge. And I think if we had the ability to step back and do a better job educating the populace of the state of New Jersey on the fact that so many employers already provide these benefits, we all agree. Nobody wants a sick person coming to work. I don't want to catch their germs because they're sitting next to me and sneeze. I don't want to eat the pizza that got sneezed on, okay? The goal of this, the social implication at the end, we all agree with. We want sick people to be able to stay home. But rather than mandate policies that are impractical to carry out, what we should do is look at ways to incentivize good business practices so that those who aren't providing these programs, the 10 or 30%, be it sick leave or PTO, that they find a way to provide these programs in a way that allows them to continue to stay in business, do business, hire, put out good products, services, and reinvest in their companies. But in the state of New Jersey, we always tend to legislate to the minority who are perceived bad players when, candidly, they're not perceived bad players. They're just trying to run their company. So we legislate to the minority. We come up with policies that drag all the good guys along. We put everybody in a box that's impractical in enforcement and application.
Michele, another question from Lynn Donaldson, and it's about paid sick leave, very popular topic. How do you classify a per diem contractor? Are per diem contractors exempt from the paid sick leave ordinances, and would they be exempt from the paid sick leave statewide proposal?
Well, we would look at the definition of per diem, and as I'm sitting here today, the definition of per diem is something less than full-time, but it's someone you're paying hourly wages to. And it really depends on the type of, if you're issuing them a W-2. If they're a W-2 employee, they are subject to this. If they're a W-2 employee, no matter how many hours, part-time, full-time, seasonal, they are subject to paid sick leave. If they're an independent contract employer, it's a different relationship. We could do some homework on whether this would extend. I would suggest probably not. My understanding is it's for W-2 employees, regardless of the number of hours they work, because they accrue it per hour.
Another question from Jack O'Connor. It's about workman's comp. He wants to know why we don't collaborate more with other New Jersey-compatible trade associations, like the Restaurant Association, to provide the desirable benefit of workman's compensation insurance.
Jack, thank you for giving me the opportunity to promote our premier partner, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group. New Jersey Manufacturers is I call it our super affinity program here at NJBIA, and New Jersey Manufacturers does provide workers' compensation insurance. I always love to step back for a minute and tell people the history of NJBIA and NJM because it's a really rich and exciting history. NJBIA is 105 years old this year. NJM is 102 years old. When NJBIA was 3 years old, NJBIA created New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Company. Now, think about industrialized Trenton back over 100 years ago. think about the manufacturing that took place, and think about a group of employers who thought about how do they protect their employees and themselves when we talk about issues of getting hurt in the workplace. And that was the genesis for New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Company. They continue to be our premier partner, and I would suggest to you that if anyone looks at their pricing, you'll find that they're an awesome, awesome program that's available to all of our members in the state of New Jersey.
Michele, I wanted to shift topics a little bit because we probably, I know you do, but we don't talk about this as an institution as much as we should. But I know a few weeks back you delivered a presentation at Temple University about the importance of sustainability, and I know you came to a lot of issues like that when you were a deputy commissioner over at DEP, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to just have a brief discussion about why sustainability is important, what we believe about sustainability, and the benefit to actually the benefit to businesses of going down that road.
It's a great topic, Peter, and one I'm very passionate about. Oftentimes when people think about sustainability, we should define sustainability in the first place, because sustainability is when we balance environment, economics, and social needs. It's kind of that three-legged stool that talks about how do you sustain into the future. And what's important for business, and many large companies have done this. In fact, I always tell folks, did you know that there's a Dow Jones Sustainability Index? So many of the Fortune 500 companies are on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and their stockholders and shareholders actually monitor their improvements through the Sustainability Index. And why is that important? Because when folks are sustainable, it means that they are basically minimizing their waste, minimizing their consumption. That all turns into dollars that are invested back into the company. There are a lot of great solutions out there for small business to get in the sustainability game if you're not. And we can certainly talk about providing resources like that more for our companies, which we have done.
Michele, shifting over to back to pension reform, which you touched on briefly. It's a very interesting topic because it, number one, shows no promise of it getting solved anytime soon. Number two, that both sides are very passionate about the way they believe, which brings me to the presentation that Tom Byrne made at an event we had a couple of weeks back. Tom is the chairman of the State Investment Council, was also on the Governor's Pension Commission, still is, the commission that came up with the recommendation to deal with our state pension crisis, a solution, by the way, which almost no interest group really supports for a variety of reasons. But the point that Tom made that stuck with me, Michele, is that we can sit and talk about this for the next 5 years. There aren't very many ways to solve this problem. There seem to be sort of two solutions. One, we can continue to take billions of dollars out of the pension fund, out of the state budget each year, or we could look at a solution that's been proposed by the Commission. And maybe the truth, as is usual, maybe the solution lies somewhere in the middle, but there's not a lot of places we can go on this issue.
Yeah, that's correct, Peter. And actually, Tom did a really fabulous presentation. For those who couldn't join us this day, actually, we're talking with Tom about pushing out some more information from the Commission in a way that everyone can understand what the Commission is looking to and what some of the solutions in an easy-to-understand manner are. Tom talked about the fact that the pension fund is 25 years underfunded, and when you talk about the exorbitant amount that we would have to contribute annually, $4 billion per year would be the normal contribution. You think about that, $4 billion, where do we have that money? And again, how does that impact all the other types of safety net programs and then money back for economic growth in the state of New Jersey? So Tom talks about opportunities to take the whole pension system, again, out of the budget process and look at it, I would suggest, in a way like non-public unions have their pension programs, where they run the program themselves, they're responsible for their investments. They do a great job at it. Many of our members are non-public unions, and I'm actually in awe of the programs that they have built and how they run their pensions. These are really sensitive issues. The people who are impacted by our pension are the people who are like the lifeline in our state of New Jersey. There are teachers, There are policemen, our firemen. They're the folks who work at the state. They're all of my colleagues at DEP, who I had the privilege of working with for 4.5 years. The services these folks provide to the state are extremely important. But I have to imagine that every one of them is as concerned about the lack of certainty in the pension as we are as companies and how it impacts income in the state. Because if I'm in that system and I'm looking forward, I know I'm scared to death thinking, is my pension going to be there for me, given the dollars that we're talking about? And unfortunately, we've seen in other states what's happened with state pensions. You know, if I was the rank and file right now, I'd be saying, I want a new solution. I want to look for a way that can give me certainty and clarity so that I can plan around that so that I know that my future is protected.
A couple of words about innovation, which is another thing we continually talk about, and I guess the notion that we're kind of coming back, that our efforts toward innovation and mainly with technology have been energized, and we are kind of trying to get back to something close to where we were about 10 years ago until sort of the whole world changed. So we could talk a little bit about that, where we are, where we want to go, and what the potential is and how we want to get to that finish.
Yeah, that's great, Peter, because everything I talk about right now when I'm out with our members and when we're here in the building where we're recording from today amongst our staff is New Jersey actually has a great story to tell, and we need to do a better job of telling that story. You know, who wants to be on a losing team? We're out there trying to attract businesses to come to New Jersey, and yet we're constantly whining about, the horrible business climate. We need to start telling the positive side of our story, and I suggest we have a lot to tell, and it starts with innovation. New Jersey was born as the innovation state. You think of the great minds, products, services that come out of New Jersey. We need to earn that title back. I've suggested to some of our policymakers that we should be so bold as to have a goal out there of changing our license plates and our state motto to the innovation state. Because guess what? We can do it. We have the ability, and we've started to plant some seeds to do it. So what do I mean about those seeds? Let's start down South Jersey, and we'll take a tour up the Turnpike. Okay, so down South Jersey, we start at Rowan University. Look at all the great development going on around Rowan University, the Tech Center, and while you're in that region, look at all the growth and development toward the west in Camden. These are innovation ecosystems that are waiting to burst. What we have when we're creating partnerships with medical schools in South Jersey is an attraction tool where researchers, pharmaceuticals, people who are in innovation and discovery and exploration in the sciences and STEM, they want to be associated with these types of ecosystems. It's being created around Rowan University and the things that are happening in Camden. Let's take get in our car and let's go up the Turnpike and let's stop in Central Jersey, our region here. We have Princeton University and Princeton Plasma Physics Lab. The innovation that comes out of that institution and the companies that come to the Princeton area to be associated with that is tremendous. While we're in the Mercer Middlesex area, let's take a stop at Rutgers and what's going on at Rutgers, New Brunswick around innovation. Again, there are business incubators popping up every day. We have entrepreneurs on college campuses, people in master's and advanced degree programs working with entrepreneurs and companies to develop the next great discovery here in the state of New Jersey. Hop back in our car and let's continue up the Turnpike and let's get off in Newark. And let's visit NJIT and New Brunswick and all the innovation going on in Newark right now. NJIT and their incubator, the types of programs that are coming out of there. And now in the north, we have the new partnership of Hackensack Medical Center with Seton Hall for yet another medical school in the state of New Jersey. So these innovation ecosystems are starting to grow. Now we need to, they're the seeds. We need to water our plants. We need to continue to invest in these areas. We need to tell the good story, and we need to showcase that New Jersey, we have our research triangles. Everybody talks about let's go down to North Carolina because of the research triangle. Guess what? We've got them in spades in New Jersey. We just have to further develop them, invest in them, and tell everybody about them.
There's a two-part question about incentives. First of all, is there any connection between trying to develop our innovation capabilities and providing the incentives to do so? In other words, should we be doing that? And in trying to boost up the relationships between the research institutions, maybe we're doing a little of that. I don't know. And in a more global sense, what is your worldview about the importance of offering incentives, because that is a topic of high controversy. Do they work? Should we be offering them? Do they help us become competitive with our neighboring states? So those two parts, what is your view, and will it help in inspiring innovation and those types of practices?
So let's take it in two parts, Peter. First of all, when we talk about higher ed, because I would suggest that's not the type of incentive that we'll talk about in a minute. Let's talk about a different type of incentive, or rather a reinvestment. It was the Christie administration that made a reinvestment in higher ed during this administration. The money that he reinvested into higher ed is spurring the growth that we talked about around Rutgers, around Rowan, around Camden, in the higher ed institutions. You drive right up the road from here through College in New Jersey, and you're going to see their big communiversity being built, okay? What we're doing is we're creating new seats in the state of New Jersey to keep the talented K-12 students that we have in our state so they can be part of the innovation going forward. And I just always love a statistic over the last, we've been, disinvested from higher ed for over a decade. So this is the first time we made an investment in higher ed, and what we're seeing as a result of that is these partnerships, new medical schools, the growth in these innovation ecosystems, et cetera, okay, and opening up new seats for New Jersey students to stay here and be a part of that. The incentives that I believe you're more speaking to, the direct incentives in the state of New Jersey should be, for attracting business and growing business, should be geared toward areas where there is priority growth for the state of New Jersey. I want to talk about Camden for a minute because I think Camden is an absolute on the verge of a success story. I had the privilege, I would say, of sitting down with Denise Morrison, the CEO of Campbell Soup, a couple weeks ago, and she was just thrilled that Campbell Soup has been named the master redeveloper for the Gateway area of Camden, and Newark and Subaru is coming in, as their neighbor on a huge redevelopment project, and she's talking about the activity that they're seeing across the water from Philadelphia, that this is now becoming a very vibrant metropolitan area. Think about it. Camden is becoming a vibrant metropolitan area. You don't do that without incentives. All right. Same up in Newark. We've got exciting things going on in another urban center. So, and why investment in these urban centers? Because I know our suburban municipalities are very concerned about this. They feel as though now they're being left on the sidelines. We're following the demographics of the state. We would be left behind if we didn't pay attention right now to our urban centers. This is where the millennials are going. And if we don't have the right infrastructure and opportunity, jobs and investment in our urban centers where the millennials are looking to relocate, we're going to lose that workforce, and we're going to lose them quick. So incentives need to be put into locations, places, and industries that are part of a strategic plan for the state, and I would suggest to you that the governor's strategic plan for the state is being recognized through where these incentives are being placed.
Michele, we could sit here all day and talk about this, and I know that there are lots more questions to get to, and we have a couple more questions that have been sent in. So what I'd like to say to those who have not had their question answered, we still have them. We will answer them, and we will reach out to you by email to get you the answer that you have asked for. Unfortunately, that's about all the time we have today, so we need to bring things to a close as we approach the noontime hour. Don't forget that all of you will be receiving a recording of today's webinar via email, and you will be getting the PowerPoint presentation via email as well. Lastly, we will be sending you a survey that we hope you'll fill out so we can understand how best to provide you important information in the webinar format. Our next Ask the President webinar will take place during the third week of July, now tentatively scheduled for July 23rd at 11 a.m. That's our next Ask the President webinar. And I would also like to announce the beginning of a new webinar series where our policy experts will give you complete regular updates on what is happening in the legislature, not just the stuff you can read online or in the paper, but they'll tell you why things are happening, why you should care about them, and why they're important for your business. That'll take place on May 19th at 11 o'clock. So please try to be with us then for our first